Toy Tactics is a strategy game with the draw of being able to literally draw the formations of your troops. As the name implies, the game is more focused on tactics than it is strategy, so being able to draw the positions of your troops exactly how you'd like is often what makes the difference between victory and defeat. That's not to say that there are no strategic elements in the game, but the focus definitely lies at a more tactical level. Despite the game's simple appearance and straightforward playstyle, I was quite surprised by the amount of depth I found as I progressed through the game's campaign. That being said, the strategic elements are for the most part relatively simplistic compared to more complex strategy games. Toy Tactics plays as a real-time strategy game, and you can also pause, speed up or slow down time in any of the game's single-player modes, so you can play at a pace that works for you. This also means that you can afford to think about the tactical choices by simply slowing down or pausing time or taking your time drawing out the unit formations that you'd like. As mentioned, the tactical choices are very important. Here, unit positioning and formations matter a great deal. For instance, surrounding enemy units makes your units deal more damage to them. Likewise, if you're surrounded, you should focus on breaking the enemy formations by focusing on a single unit. Having the high ground can also matter a great deal. For instance, archers will deal more damage and shoot further when they have the high ground. So it can make a lot of sense to position your archers on the high ground and position your other units in a way where they can defend the archers so they can keep shooting on the enemies. You can also utilize the pencil to split your formations by drawing in multiple places on the screen if you want to position some units here and some units there. Some units also have bigger attacks on a cooldown that will only trigger every once in a while, so sometimes it can make sense to reposition your units out of combat only to bring them back in to maximize your damage versus damage taken by only bringing them in once an empowered attack is ready to go. Each of the game's 5 factions has 6 different unit types, including 2 hero type units. All the units have clearly defined strengths and weaknesses. For instance, the cavalry is dealing the most damage at high speed, so they're the best at just targeting the backline, killing some archers and then riding back out. Whereas if you let them sit still and fight against infantry, they'll easily lose the fight. Infantry, on the other hand, is really good at defending, for instance, your archers, but they're not so good at fighting hero units because they'll do these massive attacks and take out many infantry at once. So this is another example of your positioning mattering quite a bit. Some examples of the differences between the factions would be that the Pendragon's hero units can be combined with regular units and essentially change out their weapon to correspond what type of unit they're paired with. So if they're paired with archers, they'll equip a giant crossbow and be able to do ranged attacks, whereas if you pair them with the cavalry, they'll get a horse of their own and be able to charge into the backlines. On the other hand, the Kyokai have a hero that can stealth and allow you to sneak into places or behind enemy formations and take out the backline first. So despite the factions being quite similar in their core design, there's also a lot of differences in playstyle because of these smaller differences between the units.
Among them were the fearless legions of Imperium. These fighters conquered many regions and defeated countless enemies, proving to be exemplary Ahem!
The game features several different game modes, including skirmishes, scenarios, multiplayer, and of course the campaign where I spent the majority of my time with the game. Toy Tactics actually has 5 campaigns, 1 for each faction. Each campaign is narrated by a humorous take on Sun Tzu, making bad puns, which I personally quite enjoyed. It added a little bit of lighthearted humor to the game. These campaigns take you through several small scenarios that are all pretty quick to run through, each ranging from probably 5 to 15 minutes per attempt. Each faction also has their own spell skill tree and artifacts for the units to unlock. As a baseline, the earlier scenarios in each campaign are relatively easy, however perfecting them by completing the scenario along with all the bonus objectives and unlocking the bonus chest can add quite a bit of difficulty to them. The bonus objectives often force you to make both strategic and tactical choices to be able to complete them. When the bonus objectives is to not lose a single archer, you'll likely be positioning your archers even more defensively than you normally would, and you'll likely also position all your other units in ways that will help defend the archers. The same goes for objectives where you have to defend a specific neutral unit that you can't control. Not using spells to defeat enemies also forces you to switch out your offensive spells that you may be used to relying on to more utility-focused spells instead. Completing a scenario will reward you with 1 faction-specific medal upon completion, plus 1 additional medal for each of the 2 bonus objectives you manage to complete. On top of the bonus objectives, each map also has a chest that you can unlock, usually by taking on extra enemies, which obviously can jeopardize completing bonus objectives. Sometimes these chests are also hidden or obtained through an almost like puzzle-like sequence. Both bonus objectives and chests play into your strategic customization options and power progression. For instance, you use medals to purchase skills in the faction-specific skill trees. You can equip up to 4 spells at once, and you cast them by building up a charge. To build up charges, you need to slay enemy units, and each spell will cost between 1 and 3 charges, depending on the potency of the spell. When casting spells, you do need to be careful, however, as they can damage your own units too. Thankfully, most spells are drawn with the pencil, so you can draw around your own units to avoid hitting them. There are a lot of different spells in the game. Examples of these are fire arrows, a fire tornado. You can make a road to make your units simply travel faster. You can build a wall to block out enemy units, summon a Trojan horse full of reinforcements. You can deploy various heals, or you can summon a giant snowball that will pick up enemy units, and if you've aimed it correctly, you might even push them off a cliff and take out a huge chunk of enemy units at once. As such, your choice of spells matters greatly for the scenario, because if there are cliffs, any sort of physics-based spells might be really good if you can push enemies off the cliffs in any capacity, whereas if there's no cliffs, these spells are not very good. The other type of strategic customization you have is artifacts. You get the artifacts from the chests that you unlock during the maps, and each unit type can equip one of 3 artifacts at any time. As an example, for Imperium's infantry, which is the Imperium standard melee units, you have the choice between weakening enemy units against projectiles, or a chance of igniting them on hit, or a higher chance of deflecting arrows. So if you're fighting a lot of archers, you might want to take the chance of deflecting arrows. In terms of difficulty, I'd say that Toy Tactics as a baseline is a relatively easy game, but there's certainly a lot of difficulty coming from trying to complete or perfect all these maps. That being said, I've also struggled a bit with some of the final bosses in the campaigns. They've definitely been pretty difficult, some of them, and positioning have been very important, especially as the bosses will also cast spells against you, so you need to be very aware that, okay, now they're casting fire arrows, so I need to reposition my units, or I might just lose half my units because I didn't pay attention. As for the rating, I think Toy Tactics is a fun and engaging strategy game. It's sometimes frustrating when your units don't move how you'd like them to, but all in all, the brief scenarios with the options to both pause and speed up time helps alleviate this quite significantly, I'd say. I also really enjoyed the physics-based gameplay where you can push enemies off a cliff. Like, it felt awesome having this giant snowball just plowing through the enemies, or a gust of wind pushing off those pesky archers. Likewise, I also really like the meta progression throughout the campaign. I like being rewarded for perfecting my scenarios by being able to purchase more spells that would help me in future scenarios. It's worth noting that I am a very casual strategy game enjoyer, so take my opinion with a grain of salt, obviously, especially in terms of the difficulty. Personally, I had a lot of fun with the game, and I would rate it at 8 out of 10 rascals. Drawing your unit formations is a very novel idea, and it's just simple and it's quick fun, and it still had a lot of depth and difficulty if you desired that. So I strongly recommend Toy Tactics if you're at all interested. As always, if you've liked the video, consider liking and subscribing, especially if you want to see more reviews. Thank you so much for watching. Have a very nice day. Until next time.